is Behind the Games from newoverlords.com, where we seek creators of all kinds to find out what's behind our favorite games. With your hosts, Jeff and Seema.
This is New Overlords Behind the Games podcast. And from our Midwest studio, I'm Jeff Ilamek.
And from our Northwest studio, I'm Seema.
Today, we are joined by Eneko of Moonatic Studios. They are the creators of an upcoming game called One Last Breath, which we are going to talk all about. Eneko, welcome.
Hi, thank you so much for having me today here. I'm so hyped.
It's a pleasure.
Excellent.
Yes.
Great to have you. Great to see you again. I really had fun seeing you in person and meeting you at PAX West, although that wasn't the first time that I checked you guys out and checked out your studio. When I heard you were going to be at PAX West, I also saw that you guys were at Gamescom, which we'll talk about, and I know you've been all over the world with this game that's in development, but at Gamescom, you guys won one of the Indie Game Awards. I started looking at who was going to be there at PAX West and saw that, and then looked at the game when I was there at PAX West, and I just thought it was amazing. And I could definitely see how it's one of the top, sort of the top indie games there. I could see how it generated a lot of buzz and interest. It's amazing visually. It's got great themes, and then the gameplay and the sort of like the puzzle walkthrough, a little bit of action walkthrough puzzle game is just super cool. But before we get into the backstory on the game, just, I didn't do a very good job of describing it there. Why don't you describe the game so that people know what we're talking about, and then they can look it up too and see it. And I'll show some video of it here as we're talking as well.
Wow, thank you so much for the introduction. It was like, oh my God, we really did all those things. It's like so overwhelming.
Nice.
So One Last Breath, as we call it, is an atmospheric adventure and a logical puzzle game where we will play as Gaia, and Gaia is, as the name we could see, is the representation of nature. So something has happened on this world, and instantly Gaia wakes up from the deeps of the earth. So we, as a representation of nature, will have to break through this post-apocalyptic world and solve logical puzzles using her powers. Gaia, as a representation of nature, will have like natural powers that will allow us to control environmental nature, like ground roots, lianas. We will use some spores, also some flowers that will protect us on our way. But although this world is a post-apocalyptic world, we are not alone. There are some creatures, some creepy creatures, that they are going to chase us, and we'll have to discover what are they, where they came from, what's happening on this world, why is this world dying, and why we as nature will have to revive this world's nature.
But it's done in Unreal, right?
Yes.
But you sort of have a panned out view. You can see a lot of the screen. You can see what's going on. There's a little bit of action. So I played through the demo, which is available on Steam now as we're talking. But I liked the little bit of action and pressure in trying to solve the puzzle. But then as soon as if you fail, if you get caught by one of the mutants when you're trying to press a button and get through the gate quick enough, it's fine. You get reset back to a checkpoint. The checkpoints are relatively close. So it's comfortable in allowing you to solve the puzzles and focus on solving the puzzle.
Yes, we wanted to make a very danger world because we always, when we started to make the game, and what feelings we want to deliver to the player, like we everything that is on the game is just for make the player feel on how we think that nature is feeling right now on real life, with this humanity pushing the nature to the limit. Like it's quite creepy. It must be creepy for nature, we deforesting all the forests and everything like that. So it's very, even if this is a puzzle game, and puzzle games a lot of times means like very relaxing game. You have your time to solve puzzles, everything like that. Of course, we have puzzles of that type puzzles, but we also have some pressure puzzles where once that you are used to our mechanics of the game, how do we interact with nature, with roots, with environmental things, you'll have to a lot of times be hurry up on your puzzle making game, because something is chasing you and they are going to rip off you in two. So it's like a contrast in this game.
I like the mix.
Yeah, it's kind of mixed, because the ones that how the puzzles are going, you get all the structure of the puzzles. You start to having to solve those puzzles but quickly, because you are going to die if you do not do that.
You can sort of evaluate the environment. You do the logic part, figure out your path, figure out what you're going to do, figure out an approach at least. And then oftentimes, when you start the execution, then you need to do it quickly. There's a mix, but there's also environmental hazards. So there's things you need to jump over. There's the robots with the lasers that will blast you if you get in the spotlights and those kinds of things. So when it's coming over, you hide under a table until the light passes and move out. So there's the environmental pieces. There's the creatures which will chase you at different trigger points. So you need to do a thing here, and then as soon as you get past this point, the monster's going to come and chase you. Then you click a button and you get through the last checkpoint.
Yeah, the making of the puzzles since the start, we didn't want to create some kind of special or a specific language for the game. Those there are a lot of kind of puzzles game where maybe you have to learn a different language of any kind of puzzle game. That we just wanted to make a logical puzzle game where all the thinking part remains on getting back to this platform. But for example, if I create a route, it allows me to get to this kind of platform, but though that route also blocks me to the other way that I must go. So I have first not grow up the route in order to maybe to open up a door, and then I have to use the route that blocks that. It's kind of it's kind of crazy puzzles logical game.
The roots and the nature part, and it's not a lot. It's not super complex, but that's the part that you get introduced right away, and it's very logical and well understood. You control these roots. Gaia walks up to it, and then you press one of the trigger buttons or keyboard buttons to control the root to make it grow or make it shrink. Besides that, though, there's the environment itself, and I liked one of the things you talked about, which was it's a mix of controlling the physical machine environment and controlling the nature environment. You're not just using your nature powers or root powers, but you got to click buttons and you got to move platforms and move things around and interact with the combination of those two things and put them together to solve the puzzle.
Yes, of course. We, as you said, we don't have to only use nature. We also have to use human-made things, like we call them, and we could speak much more later why we are also using buttons, machines, and things like that, because that has a very deep message behind it. But of course, as you said, we also have to use elevators. We have to use cranks, levers, buttons, use, for example, to reach a platform where we have to use a machine that turns around so we could get to the nature. It's like a mix between nature and humanity.
I noticed when you describe the game, you talk about this world. Are we as players meant to see this world as planet Earth?
Yes, it's indeed a planet Earth. I mean, it's like how would be nature? How would be the Earth if we keep harming nature? No, not wondering ourselves. What are we doing? It's kind of version that we imagine.
It's a pretty compelling way to look at it.
Yes,
and fun.
And it's recognizable. Well, the environment is recognizable as Earth. The mutants are not. So there we hope we don't that never becomes recognizable. But there's a little bit of wildlife. There's the industrial settings that you're going through.
Yeah, but a lot of science fiction planets are recognizable in those ways.
Yeah.
Yeah, we have variety in our scenarios. We have like more natural scenarios where we have to break through and see, for example, how the nature has been destroyed. Afterwards, we are, for example, in a town from Brazil that will remind us a lot of about Brazil. More
Oh,
after that scenario, we are going to go to more industrial buildings. Right after that, or again, we are going to come back to the nature, laboratories, a cave, undergrounds.
One of the other things you mentioned just before we get off of it is the idea that the discovery of how you control the environment is pretty intuitive. I mean, if there's buttons, there's a button, there's a switch, you just go over and press the switch. The only extra part that you need to figure out that you figure out very quickly is how to control the nature powers, the little nature elements that Gaia can control. As opposed to, and there, I think I think this is Scorn. Is Scorn the new game? It's sort of like an environmental puzzle game that's completely foreign. You have no idea how to control the environment. There's the affordances. It's just all this like weird Cronenberg world, and you got to like press things.
Yes.
Which can in some ways be interesting, but can also be frustrating because you have no idea what you're supposed to do when you get into a scene or an environment where you do here, and it makes sense, and it's nice to at least have an idea of what you can control and where you could put a route and what buttons you could push.
We have achieved this with quite simple way. It's like our nature mechanics are so easy to use. The difficult part of our mechanics is to explain them without using any kind of text. So that was one of our biggest risks, because me as a designer, I didn't want to put any kind of text on the game, any kind of HUD that will pop up you a screen button where will say you can do this and you can do that. So I had to see, and I have to figure out how could I teach the player to do this and to learn this quite intuitive. So we came up with an idea that, okay, what we can do is quite clear with which objects you can interact. Like, for example, if you want to control the roots, you are going to see a plant that has a very shiny green light. So you absolutely know that you have to control or you have to interact with that flower. So when we go instantly to that flower and we interact with them, the camera will change and will have a static view of the roots. So my goal was to anything you do, you will see it on the screen. Like, for example, you are not going to press a button, you are not going to press a flower, and the effect is outside of the screen. I mean,
yeah, right.
What you interact with is you are going to see the effect instantly, what has done. So, and the first time you are going to find this kind of natural interactive points. They are quite simple. It's not complex. Like, for example, the first time you are going to interact with a root, it's so easy because you only have one way to go, and there are some routes that needs to create a bridge. So if you do not do that, you are not going to go further. So the first time you are going to use their rows, you are going to grow them, and you are going to make a bridge. So after that, it's so easy to know that the way the roots are controlled. I'm so happy to achieve that.
Right, and that's a great. I didn't even realize it to that extent until you described it. That's a great design approach. Anything you do, any button you press, any interaction that you do, being able to see real time, to see it on the screen, to see the interaction of what that does to the puzzle, the environment that you're trying to control. That's really nice from a player perspective. You play some of these other puzzle games where you get into a room and there's a button and you press the button and it does something, in some other world or, 3 rooms away, and you have no idea what it did.
Yes,
And
and
that can be
that's
kind of frustrating.
that could be quite confusing for the player. Like for example, we could do that with another interactable object. Like for example, when you see a box on your path, of course you know that you are going to push that. So I don't need to explain to you what to do. Or maybe when you see some ladders, I don't have to explain to the players that they can climb ladders, because that is a
Right.
mechanic that it's in almost every game. But these kind of special mechanics that are quite simple, of course are quite simple, but maybe you cannot figure out because it's not in every game. Instead, I haven't seen in many games that you can control route. Like for example, how would the player would know what to do without having a tutorial? Well, showing them what they have to do. Instead, I could
Right.
give you a very clue also that what you are going to do, the first thing you are going to do once you play the game, the first time you play the game, is going to be grow some roots. So this is
Right.
kind of internal language as a designer that I say to the player, the first thing that you are going to do when you start playing the game is going to be the most common thing you're going to do on the game.
Makes a lot of sense. And it's rendered really well. And we'll get back to that. I want to talk about Unreal and the environment because it's just beautiful and everything's connected and all of that too. But before we go there, why don't we rewind a bit and talk about the start of Moonatic and you getting into this and the sort of the origin story. Where did this all start?
It
Where did you
all
get it kicked off?
started with a couple of friends on the university that we wanted to make. I always say that when we started making One Last Breath, we didn't know that we will, reach this time where we could be able to fly to Seattle, to Gamescom and Tokyo. It was impossible for us, but we had one thing clear, and was that we wanted to make a game that when after 20 years from today, when we look back for our first game, to be proud of. This wasn't a game that was born to be sold or born for the market, but this was a game that started from the bottom of our hearts of what did we consider that would be nice to look at um, within some years when we see back to our first game and see this was a great game for to be our first game. And
Yeah.
we started to make the game. We started to thinking about what game did we want to start making, and suddenly we came up with this idea of nature, and we did a vertical slice, a little demo. So we went to a local game festival that we have here in Basque Country. So suddenly a lot of publishers came like with a lot of interest of what are you doing here? It looks really cool. And after that moment we started seeing even One Last Breath with different eyes. Like, okay, this is getting more attention, so maybe it has some future, some market future. So after that, we reorganized ourselves. We started to get in more people to the development of, we are doing this. It's so great. I mean, we are having so much fun. It's very hard to do a game without any kind of resources. That's true.
Yeah.
But we are getting some attention. So maybe someday we could get this to the market and
It gave you new energy.
yes, and have something with this. So that's how we formed a 5 people studio.
Okay, so it started with 5 out of university?
Yes,
Okay. What university?
we are from Pamplona, near Basque
Pamplona.
Country. The bull running, the
Yeah.
bull running city. We are not from there, but the university was there. So we started.
Yeah.
When we finished the university, we got back to the development. Full time with no resources. It was a hard moment right there. Now we are so lucky to say that we have some resources to do the game. It's amazing, but back those days was quite difficult for us.
So it started with the 5 people. You started to show off the vertical slice, and that's very important. If we've talked about this with other developers, that vertical slice, the look at it, not only not only to be able to show it off to people because now you've got enough of a game that you can show a piece, but for yourself to be able to see it rendered and be able to see if it's going to work from a gameplay perspective and all of that. Do a vertical slice. Don't spend 2 or 3 years doing, an underlying engine component and without checking if the game's even going to be interesting or fun.
Yeah.
Because you can get yourself into trouble.
Yeah, indeed.
So you did that.
Even our vertical slice, it wasn't like so much worked. I mean, it was quite amateur vertical slice, I must admit, but it showed what could One Last Breath be if we put all of our efforts on it. I mean,
Mhm.
obviously it didn't have any visuals that has right now. Not also with mechanic, like the mechanics were quite different, but we could see there that there was something behind the game, that if someone wanted to support the development, we could do something bigger and something better.
So you started with the 5 people. When was that? When did you guys start even just
we are going to do a 2-year birthday from the studio. So
Okay.
It was like 2 years ago. 2 years ago today, we would be working on that vertical slice.
So with where you're at today and with as great as this looks and getting to Gamescom at PAX West in Tokyo, which we'll talk about in just a second, 2 years is a relatively short amount of time.
Yeah, I was just thinking that.
Yeah, and I must admit that we didn't have any kind of resources till the first month of this year. I mean, the first year of the development was quite stressful because we were in some kind of initiative here in Spain that didn't work very well for us. It harmed us a lot as a studio, as people also. It was quite a bad experience for us. We learned a lot about it, like who we don't want to work with, or which initiative. And once we were out from that initiative, like 10 months ago, we started developing the game with Nexio Labs, that acquired us as a studio, as Moonatic Studios. And we could say that the real development started like 1 year ago, more or less.
Got it. So Nexio acquired you, and they're sort of a publisher, developer, and develop even other technology on their own. I'm sure that they saw the potential not only in this game, but in the raw talent that you guys are showing off in the design, both design, organization of the game logic, and the themes and art are just amazing as well. So then you got engaged with Nexio. You got a little bit of backing, which I'm sure was a big help. You went to game shows in Spain, and then you did this global world tour. So why don't you talk? That kicked off with Gamescom, right? That was the first one?
Yeah, Gamescom was the first one. I mean, it was the beginning of the madness, Gamescom, for us. It was a month of madness, but very exciting because I have never been outside of Spain, and suddenly I had to go 1 month out from my home. First time to Germany, then to Seattle, and finish this madness month with the Tokyo Game Show. That was so great.
Right.
I mean,
it's incredible.
Yes, it was incredible. This was the first time going out from Spain for us, for the studio, even from me personally also, and having this first experience outside of my country, having these festivals was so great.
It was really fun meeting you guys there in PAX West. It was great to see a bunch of people crowding your booth too and checking out the game. So how did that work out for you in each of these shows, both interacting with people, seeing the game for the first time, getting feedback? What was so what did you sort of get out of it, do you feel, after doing all like that whirlwind tour of 3 shows?
Yeah, well, it wasn't the first time we showed our game in public, because we have been also in Spain on local video game events. Also, it has been a year now. It's a year from since we started showing the game to the public. So we had a another madness month here in Spain, where every weekend we had to travel all around from our country. We had to go, for example, to Barcelona, then to Madrid, then to more cities from our country. But it was the first time going out from Spain, and having this kind of feedback more, where players come. Maybe they do not expect playing indie games on these kind of festivals, because they go for biggest games, like AAA games. But there are some people that maybe for casuality they come to indie booths, so they are very their critics is sometimes is quite harmly, because they criticize the games quite hard sometimes. But the other
Because
times,
they're used to
when
the AAA games, you mean?
yes, that's right. So, but the other time, that's something good also, because their feedback is so honest. So for us, it was a great show, because most of the feedback we received on these shows was, perfect. The people love the game. The people love the theme, the ambience, the mechanics, the puzzles. So for us, it was so exciting to see the people getting excited for the game. And, being at Gamescom with so much games that are just perfect, beautiful games at Indie Booth Arena, having a talk with them, with bigger indie studios, smaller indie studios, big companies like THQ Nordic, Handy Games, and these kind of companies, and having their feedback with your game is something that is unpriceable. It was so great. The same happened with Seattle also. Seattle was also so great to meet a lot of people that I personally I admire from the other game, that I didn't expect never to know them personally. And knowing them just on with our first game, it was like beautiful. And
Yeah.
while receiving that kind of feedback, professional feedback, let's say at Gamescom with the award, also on PAX West with a couple of articles with different press that put us on one of the best 13 games of PAX West, was like, this is crazy. I remember talking to my colleagues, and we were like, this is crazy. Getting out first time with our first game, and having this such hype from the people, and this feedback for the people is something that we wouldn't expect never to happen.
Interesting. I and big congratulations on it too. I think it's super cool for you guys to get that kind of recognition, and well deserved, as I said. Is just really one of the I rated it one of the top games that I saw as well, which is why we're talking now.
Thank you.
Now, you did, just so to wrap up on that, you did this whirlwind tour in Spain. You did this global tour. That's a lot. Now, if you're going to talk to another new studio, they're starting up, they've got a game. Would you tell them, yes, do as much as you can, or was that too much? Or, what is your advice on
My
now
advice
that
would
you've
be
done
to
that?
try to go as much as local events as possible. Of course, there's a handicap of money. This costs quite a lot of money. Well, depending on the country, and but this costs a lot of money. But I would encourage a lot of people to do this, because you get a lot of feedback, you learn a lot, not only from the players but also from the other developers, because you meet a lot of developers nowadays. I can say that I know a lot of developers from Spain, because I've been, everywhere here in Spain.
Mhm.
Instead, I'm going to a festival this weekend also, and I know a lot of people right now, and it's so great to know that there are also developers that they are in similar situation as you, with no money, trying the best as they can. You know, it's so great to go these kind
Yeah,
of festivals.
that's interesting. And we've heard time and time again, getting involved in the developer communities wherever you can. And some of them are online and global, some of them are local, a lot of them where you can meet up and talk to people in person. You get a lot of high quality interaction that way. Everyone seems to get a ton of value out of doing that.
Of course.
And
Yeah. 100%.
we're seeing these development pockets grow. We've talked to a bunch of studios out of like Boston, for example, and I'm learning and meeting a bunch of the studios out of Poland. How would you say that Spain's development scene is? Is it a lot of studios? Is it a small number of studios? Do you think it's really going to get big and grow, or what's your assessment of Spain for game development industry?
There are a lot of indie game studios, and there's a lot of talent. I mean, it's incredible. I mean, every festival I go, I know more studios, I know more people, more games, and they are so great games. But we have a handicap also, that is not there's not too much support from the government to this kind of video games. So we are lack of resources. So for us, a publisher that comes to a game festival here in Spain is like gold. I mean, all the studios go for that publisher to, hey, I'm doing this game, I would like to show you. Then there are, I mean, I honestly say that there are a lot of great games. I mean, it's impressive. I mean, I'm so overwhelmed of how much good, great games are here nowadays in Spain. Instead, a lot of people says that we Spain as an industry are having a second gold era. The indie game studios, we have a lot of game studios, but they, you know, not having resources to make games also made a lot of companies to close up their studio. But hopefully this is going to change next years, and you will be able to see more games from Spain.
That'd be interesting, and we'll keep an eye out for that. I like finding these pockets, these centers of studio development, and it's sort of like these hot spots that are producing new games and studios. And it seems to really happen in geographically to some degree, because you get a lot of people form a community and support each other, and you get people crossing around back and forth. Sometimes that happens around like the Krakow community and the indie games happening out of there. That's CD Projekt Red. So it's happening around a big AAA, maybe. Same thing in Boston. There's a couple AAAs out of Boston that sort of grew the indie scene around it. But having a strong group of people that can share ideas, form companies together, trade resources back and forth over time, that seems like a really incredible opportunity.
Help each other. I mean, I know that we as in the studios also help each other. If you need anything that I can handle you, that could improve your development or help you in your development. If I can do that, I'm going to do that. I mean, so we help each other in this, with this in the studios.
Yeah,
so
excellent.
That's so great.
So let's talk about the game a little bit more. The platform, the tech is Unreal. You're right. You did it in Unreal, and you said you moved to Unreal 5?
Yes, a couple of months ago.
Yeah, interesting. It looks amazing. You get a little bit of that feel of it's not hyper real, but it's enough realism that there's just so much detail in the environments and the depth in the environments. Even though you're sort of like panned back and you're sort of looking at it from a puzzle perspective, the amount of detail that you guys have in these environments and how everything's sort of all connected. You flow from like one zone to the next and one room to the next. You go down an elevator and everything's just sort of connected. That seems and like an extreme amount of environmental development. Is that the case?
Yes.
Is Unreal
Yes,
making
it is.
easy on you guys?
I must admit that I'm quite obsessed on creating a scenarios that feel, organic. So a lot of times I have discussions with my art director from the studio and the environmental artist of saying that, okay, we have this scenario, we have to make it feel that it's organic. So things must be happening on the background of the scenario, not just on the front line where the player, plays the game, because it's a side scroller. So you only will move in two axes, like in front of you and up and down. So you are not going to move to in depth. So I have a lot of time discussions with my teammates. Like it's like, oh, we should do more things like this here in the background. If you move, a button here that should be connecting to maybe a light that is on the background, but that doesn't have any impact real on the gameplay, but it has on the environmental, feeling in and the atmosphere that you feel that you are really changing the world. I mean, that you are
Yeah.
part of this world, not also not to feel the game quite, static. It's
Right.
it's one of my biggest fears on the development, to let the game feel quite static and not organic and real.
Yeah, and I would say you've definitely achieved that. Even just I played halfway through the demo. You say it's a side scroller, and I guess it is. I mean, it definitely is, but it doesn't feel that way. Even though you only are moving in 2 dimensions, kind of it feels like a deep, fully fleshed 3D world that you could, like, if you weren't doing this puzzle, you could just turn the other direction and go walk off into the distance. It just feels deep and rich. There's things happening, as you said, in the foreground and background, even outside, that make it seem like a fully rendered, just a fully rich, explorable 3D world. You just happen to be doing this puzzle that you need to get done, but there's like a deer doing, that walks into sort of the foreground in one part, and it gets sick, and you see that happen. And then there's like a mutant behind glass that's in another room, and it's not affecting your puzzle, but it like sees you there, and it freaks out a little bit.
Yeah, and that affects also, to the player, and their feeling on the game. They feel quite anxious, or because they think that the enemy is going to chase them. But I know as a designer that the players are going to think that, so I won't make that creature follow you. I'm going to make another creature that you don't expect it to follow you. It's like mind gaming with me as a designer and you as a player. It's kind of this kind of play between us, we could say.
Right.
Interesting.
Right. Yeah, when I would just with the richness of the visuals and the art, I expected at any moment just to be able to turn and walk off in just some random direction and go explore the rest of the world. So, it's very well rendered that way.
Thank you so much.
The detail within the environments, just the detail of the models and the textures. I wouldn't say it's like hyper real, because it's definitely stylized, but it's a very rich style and a very detailed style.
Yes, we always say that we are crafting this game so carefully, and me as a designer and also the artist and the environmental artist, we are giving to it a lot of love. So everything we do, we are doing it with as much as love as we can. We pay attention a lot of details that we have, as you said, not only in the front line but also at the background. And maybe we are only going to see a silhouette from it, but we want to make the best silhouette as possible. So maybe if we are only going to see a silhouette from an object or from a 3D prop at the background, maybe we are not going to do a texture for that prop, but the silhouette that it's going to have, it must be perfect, and it must feel, here are quite difficult artist creation of, we use a lot of silhouettes, so maybe we do not have a lot of complex textures, but the difficulty when making those kind of props are to generate a very clear silhouettes, so you do not have to see the textures to discover what that is, because you are going to recognize that object with only using the silhouette.
Right. You don't have any other clues. You only have the silhouette.
Yeah, and that's enough sometimes to make you, to the player, to understand what is that thing that is on the background.
Got it. And I know high attention to silhouettes is a very core technique to a lot of art and rendering and animation and entertainment development. And
yes,
So that's something that people really need to pay attention to. Now, with a small team, and as I think about it, as I think about the mix of what kind of elements you have, and just the amount of detail, Gaia and the roots and the flowers, there seems to be a lot of sort of like sculpted, uh, uh, 3D modeling kind of going on, and then I'm more comfortable when I've done some practice modeling in hard surface modeling, and I do hard ops in Blender, and I like cutting the hard surface modeling. Seems like you almost have it's very natural, but a mix of like these different techniques and tool sets within the modeling and the art that you're doing as well, and how they're sort of like textured and rendered. Is that the case, or I mean, do you just have an just natural artist or two that does it, that can do it all, or do you split those skills
No, we
between
have
different people?
very talented people here on the studio. So whenever we discuss on what do we need in a scenario, I mean, all the artists can do that. I mean, we are lucky or or smart to have this kind of atmosphere. So they only need a good shape. They maybe don't need any kind of ultra realistic texture. So so the models have to be done in a specific way. So we are lucky to have a very talented people that can do a vegetation, can do sculpted models. They most of the models that we have on the game are hard surfaced models, but they are quite you know quite good positioned on the scenario to make you think that how the things or how the scenario works on with those
Yeah.
shapes. I mean, it's quite tricky, and I have also the art director that he also is the environmental artist that is doing a very great job to achieve this this variation of models. As you said, some of them are sculpted, but many of them also are hard surfaced. So having those kind of variation with that, we create, or I consider that we create a very good variating models.
And then layer on top of that the animations, which are also really well done and natural and engaging. Just, Gaia moving around, the roots as they grow, the interaction with the mutants, all of that animation just seems really well rendered and natural and flows really well as well.
Yes,
I
we
really
are.
like that.
Indeed, we are also right now currently improving our animations even to the next level. So we are trying to give it more details and more animations on the game. We won't have, like, for example, like more than one run cycles for the player. More, a lot of detailed animations that you can, you can step up when you are running, or maybe when you are running away from the enemies is not going to be the same run cycle as when you are running relaxed. So this, we consider that this kind of game, like atmospheric adventure, must have a lot of these little details to feel the game really good. So that's why, for example, we are in a 2 year right now, 2 year development. Maybe we don't have like 8 hour long game, but we have a very good quality short game. And
Yes.
instead, it's not that short. I mean, it's not going to be 1 hour long game. I mean, it's going to be a minimum 3-4 hour game long. And what we are trying to do is giving a lot of detail and giving a lot of attention to every aspect of the game: animations, visual effects. The sound is done everything by us. So we are recording all the sounds of the game, trying to do, because we also think that the sound in this kind of games, of atmospherical games, must be very perfectly done. So we have a sound engineer that is working full time with us, that is trying to to give it very a lot of immersion to the player, like details, like it doesn't going it's not going to sound the same way a barrel inside a building or outside a building, in a forest or in in a lumber mill. I mean, everything is handcrafted very well. It's not the best way to do a video game, because the most common thing is just to do um um to do a thing that you are going to reuse it a lot of times.
Right. A sound asset.
Yeah, and we are doing the contrary thing. I mean, we are so obsessed with the details. So we are trying to, this barrel is going to sound differently than the barrel that is going to be inside that house. So do not take us as an example on how to do properly and with a good production video game, but it's just something passionate about us. We didn't expect to make this game to the market. So now that we have options, we want to do a really passionate game and, a really lovely game in general.
And
what I'm super impressed by is when you talk about the game, so much thought has gone into it. And like you say, so much passion. And everyone must have taken part in all that thought. And in a lot of projects with a lot of thought, sometimes the action doesn't actually happen. But you have all the thought in place, but you also have incredibly achieved a lot of like actual making, like not just thinking, not just dreaming.
Yes, it's like a lot of times happens that, for example, that we have planned to do certain action, certain event on the game, and when we say on who is going to take more work on their shoulders to do these, to take this action. So a lot of times, many times, it's me or it's my, is the other co-founder of the game that we take that. We really think that this thing must be on the game. So we do not mind to take that pressure on our shoulders, and we say that, okay, we are going to do this. So if the development must take a couple of months more in order to make it gold, it's going to be that. I mean, we don't have any plans for release. We only know that it's going to be for 2023, but we always say that it's going to be released when it's ready, when we feel like it's our dream game. Not our dream game, I mean, because a dream game of a developer never ends, but it's only going to be released when we really think that it represents of what we had on our minds.
So if you just decided, like, for this time in your life, work-life balance is just out the window?
I must admit it is. I mean, it's not good to admit, because it's something that we are aware that this couldn't be, this couldn't last a lot of time. But we, as always say, we are young people. I'm so passionate about video games.
Now is the time.
Yeah, and now's the time to make these risks, or to make these risks, because in the future I hope to have more responsibilities, like more personal responsibilities as a family, as a children, or maybe or having to pay a house. So now's the time for me. It's how I see nowadays my life. It's now my time to to make all the efforts, to sacrifice quite a bit my time, maybe not to play too much, or maybe not partying too much at the weekends or things like that, and to do a game that I wish that I would love to play.
Sure. That's a really mature
it is.
Viewpoint, professional viewpoint as well, to recognize that yes, we're doing it this way.
And it's not sustainable.
And it's wrong.
Yes.
But recognizing where the flaw is and saying, okay,
it's right for now, but we have to,
right. But this is where we would like to get, and we know what the right development model should look like.
And we are going to, I mean, we always say in our studio that this kind of development is going to be only sustainable for one last breath. For the rest of the game, we are not doing this. I mean, we have to be concerned of our health, and not only about that. Also, we have to see, because this is something that is not well done. This kind of development. We are aware about that, but also we have to see that this development have been like a roller coaster, because we started without money. Suddenly we had resources, we had salaries from us, we had money to hire more people. So this has been a very crazy development. Why won't we finish the development the same way as we started, being crazy, being like young people passionate about video games? And we are going to finish like that way. But of course, once we finish this development, we are going to to get a step back and start doing the things that should they be done. I mean,
I really think that you guys have a platform almost of not only like tool sets, but the skills and the experience of what you've developed. As I said, sorry. As I said, I think just my desire to take a left turn and go explore the environment. I would love to see what you guys could do in the future to open it up and make an open world 3D world exploration game on top of this. It seems like, as you said, you're developing all these tools and techniques and the animations and what's going on in the different layers and the sound, that maybe it could expand in that direction in the future. There's one other part of the development though that I wanted to hear about a bit, which is the themes and the environmental aspect of it. You said you all wanted to think hard about what mattered to you and put some of that into what you were developing as well. Why don't you describe that a bit? Because I think that's an important part of what you've done and what we've heard of some studios doing, which adds a bit more meaning to what gets produced.
Yes, we wanted to do something that really has an impact for us when we started to make this game, or when we started to wonder what type of game we wanted to make. I remember when I saw on news that we were under quarantine on COVID-19, and I remember very clearly when I saw on the news that in Venice the animals were taking back all the city for them because the people they were locked up at their homes. And I remember to think at that time, like, I must do something that has a relation with nature, because this is something that I could see on those images, the animals getting back what is there. So we started to thinking about, so what we have, what must we be doing wrong to make the animals go out from their place? So how's the nature feeling because of us? How's the nature, or how would I feel if I would be the nature and I had a thing called humanity behind me, pushing me to the limits? And that's quite creepy. I mean, if you start thinking about it, it's quite creepy how we harm nature, this all global warming. And I just wanted to, from that point, we knew that we wanted to, to make a game that has a very important and very explosive message of nature on beneath the game. So that's how I started it all. I mean, in fact, I also nowadays I live in a city, but I am from a little town with 300 people on the village, and and I'm from the mountain. At when I was young, when I went out for my home, I could see mountains all the way. Everything was green. Everything was rivers going, a lot of animals, wild animals going around my home and my house in vast country. So I missed that a lot when I started to studying video games developing, because I moved to a big city as Pamplona, and for me that was I missed a lot nature at that time. Yeah. So it was a combination about seeing those news with animals going to the city in Venice and missing my hometown a lot. So I presented to my colleague what was my idea of doing this nature relationship between nature and humanity, how we relate each other, and how we want to focus the message on the game. And he really liked it. And nowadays, when we started to making the game, it was so easy to confuse the message on on the nature is the good guy and the humanity is the bad guy. But I don't really think like that. I mean, because I've been living in the nature for years, and I love nature, and I know that humanity can get along well with nature, but only if we as humanity put a lot of effort in that. So that's why when we can get back, as we said at the beginning of the podcast, the mechanic of why are we also moving machines or pushing buttons, using elevators, using, because we wanted to create a relationship between nature and humanity. In fact, the player, Gaia, is a viper. It looks quite similar as human, and also we have to use nature, but also we have to use machines. So it's a very perfect example of what do we want to achieve with the game, is that there's a puzzle where you have to create a bridge, and we will use nature to create half of that bridge, but we will have to use a machine to create the other side of the bridge. So that's right. We create a bridge done with human-made things and also with nature.
Again, the richness with the way you have been able to communicate some of those messages very subtly throughout the game so far is really impressive. It doesn't throw it in your face. It doesn't make, humanity's bad, nature's good. It's there. You can get the feel of it, and you're solving these puzzles, and you're doing the game.
Yes, at the beginning of the development, when we wanted to deliver this message, it was so easy to for example, having a prop on the background where there's a message of some kind of group of people of this world saying that we are killing nature, and it's so clear in that way on the message that we wanted to deliver. But me as a designer, I wanted to explore some of the ways to to tell the messages that I wanted in my game. So I tried to deliver in a message through mechanics and through puzzles. With that, I'm sure, and I know that not most of the people will understand the message or even think about it. But I know that the people that are going to discover and are going to think about a game and those analysis and reviews for the game, that they are going to analyze the game more in depth, if they realize about these kind of messages and subtle messages that I leave on the game, I'm sure that they are going to love that.
And that's,
I think even if they don't get it, I think it'll still kind of come through.
Right. The mechanic is the message.
Yeah.
You play as Gaia, and again, you're not fighting humanity, but you do, as you play through, even subconsciously, you would expect there would be that empathy that would develop for Gaia's perspective, as you're needing to see where there is nature and where there's not nature, and where this balance has been disrupted, and where you're using some of these tools to overcome things. But as you said, relying on the environment, the mechanics to communicate that message is a really sort of advanced, mature, artistic way to go about it that I find really impressive. As opposed to, as you said, putting a big, a billboard in the background with
that would be so easy to
do.
Yeah, that would be so easy to do. And I wanted to go further. I mean, I wanted to make something special. As this game is special, why would I do crazy things? I mean, this kind of crazy things, because the way that we tell our story, our narrative on the game is a silent narrative. We are not going to have any kind of texts, diaries, conversations, because there's no humans on this world. Spoiler.
Right.
and so I had to find a way to tell this story, but only for those people that they really want to know more about it, because there's something that I really wanted to make sure that is like, for those people that they don't want to know anything about the story, they only care about puzzles and everything like that, I don't want to bother them. So I'm not going to put any kind of conversations, diaries, anything like that. But at the same time, I want to give tools to those players that they really want to know what is going on this world. So that's why the narrative is going to be silent, and you will have to discover what's happening, looking around to your, to all the scenario, what's happening, what are those buildings, some kind of evil logos that you are going to discover.
Right. The evil corporations lurking in the background of whatever's sort of
so when you were
antagonists.
When you were growing up in a village of 300, did you know you wanted to be a game developer?
Yes, absolutely. I remember when I was a child, my first console was a color Game Boy. And since I played my first game, that I think it was Pokemon Yellow, I remember that I just loved video games. And when I really realized that I wanted to, to do something with video games, could be just making them, or I don't know, doing something related with video games, was with Metal Gear Solid 4. That game was the first Metal Gear Solid that I played. Afterwards, I played, all the Metal Gear Solid because it's my favorite saga. But I remember it was with the first game that I cried, and I was like 12, and I didn't understand why was I crying with that video game. Why was I getting so emotional? And that was the moment that I felt like, oh my God, I have to work in video game industry in some way or another.
Right.
I love it when game designers talk about games that made them cry. That's just so special.
Yes.
It's understanding that there's art here, and there's art and message
and impact.
And it's not just
Yeah.
And it's something that matters. Okay, so you've got the demo's playable right now on Steam.
Yes.
And it's beautiful. It's amazing. It does not seem like a demo to me. It seems like a game. So I recommend anyone to check it out. You said 2023 is sort of the roadmap there. So we'll be watching very closely and keeping an eye out for more. Just to sort of take us out then, if we're looking at that in 2023, what is, if say you're going to think 3 years out, 4 years out, 5 years out, you got any ideas of what the future for you or games in Spain or any of that's going to look like? What do you want to tease us with for the future?
I can say that we are already have been started to thinking about the next game, because we are on the last steps of the game development of One Last Breath. So of course we have started to thinking about what do we want to do on the future. The only thing that I can say is that we want to explore more things. We want to explore, other genres, other perspectives of playing a video game. Of course, we want to have, again, impactful message on our next video game. But I'm sure that it's going to be a great game. I mean, we have just started to thinking about, having some brainstormings on which game do you want to, or which path do we want to follow as a studio, or how could we take all the things that we have learned from One Last Breath to take advantage of them in our next game, in our next development. And I'm so positive about our future, about the future of Moonatic Studios. It's going to be so great. I'm so happy to have this team. It's wonderful to working with them.
That's fantastic.
Sounds amazing, and I'm really excited as well. And I think the partners that you've made in the industry are very lucky to have you guys now that are people that they get to work with. And I'm going to be watching very closely the next couple of years as well. So
thank you so much.
Well, this has been great. As I said, I'm really excited. I only played it on PC, but I didn't play it on my Steam Deck yet. I'm going to be playing the demo on my Steam Deck because it does seem like it's well suited to controller in addition to keyboard. So I'm going to do that. And I will hopefully see you at some more game shows too.
Yeah.
So
Obviously,
yeah.
of course, we would like to be, and I could say that it's pretty sure that we are going to be also next year, maybe with One Last Breath again once it's released, or maybe with kind of demo of from our next game of the next year shows. Like, I would love to be
Don't
again
put
at
too
the
much pressure
Gamescom.
on yourself.
Yeah. Yeah.
I would love to be. I would love to be in Gamescom again next year,
Yeah.
at PAX also, and Tokyo Game Show. It would be so great to be there again.
That would be great. All right. As I said, this is excellent, and we'll be watching closely. And I really want to thank you for jumping on and talking to me so much. I think I came by your booth 3 or 4 or 5 times
Yes.
at PAX. So
Take
that was
care.
excellent too. And we will stay in touch and talk to you soon.
Same. Thank you so much for having me here today.
That was
Yeah,
great.
thanks.
That was so fantastic.
This has been a New Overlords production. For more, please visit newoverlords.com for video, subscribe and feed links, and other ways to help the show.